Buy Back Your Time with Dan Martell is an episode you don't want to miss. Dan is an award-winning entrepreneur, investor, best-selling author, and coach to over 1,000 SaaS founders. He joined me, or more accurately, I joined him in his studio to discuss his book, Buy Back Your Time, where we covered how to get unstuck, reclaim your freedom, and build your empire. Enjoy this conversation. Dan, welcome to The Growth Guide. I want to start our conversation with a simple question that seemed to have a material impact on changing your life. You had a conversation with a man named Brian, and he said to you, Dan, what are you doing here? Can you take us back to what was happening in your life and how that conversation started you on a completely different path?
Yeah, it's an emotional story to share because, even now as I just left my house to meet up with you and look at this, I don't know, man, I'm still crazy. Like, it'll never be lost on me just how rare my life is considering where I came from. I mean, long story short, Brian was a guard. He had been there for 11 years in this prison that I was sentenced to when I was 16. That was the second time I had been to jail. Juvenile detention the first time. It was an adult prison with a juvenile block the second time. I just grew up in a lot of turmoil. My mom was an alcoholic and my dad was traveling quite a bit. So I was the second oldest of four. And I don't know, man. I don't think I'm much different than a lot of kids growing up. I just got in trouble. Like, it's kind of funny. My dad always said, like, you and your brothers would both do the same thing, but then you would get caught. And getting caught, like, when it's, when you're, before 10 is kind of cute. And then it gets serious when you're, stealing cars and doing drugs and stuff as a teenager. So, yeah, I ended up getting a high-speed chase where I almost took my life and ended up in prison. And for whatever reason, I tried to stay out of the prison politics and keep to myself. And one day I get in a fight with a kid named Kurt and get thrown in the hole, which is probably the most, degrading thing you could ever do to another human. Literally, 23 and a half hour lockdown in your underwear. And on the third day, Brian pulls me out of my cell and tells me to follow him. And he'd been probably working at the prison for 10 years, so he'd seen a lot of kids. We're walking back down towards the cell block where I was living. And we walk past the door that goes into the cell block into the next door, which is the guard unit. And he opens the door and I'm freaking out because I'm not even supposed to. Like, no inmate has ever, as far as I'm aware, it's like the red zone. You don't go there. And he tells me to follow him. And it's like the inside of the two-way mirror, right? That overlooks both cell blocks. And he sits me down in the corner and he just looks at me and shakes his head. And he goes, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "What do you mean? I got in a fight with Kirk." And he's like, "No," he goes, "Not that." He goes, "What are you doing in this place?" And I was like, "Well, like high-speed chase and guns and drugs." And he's like, "No, not that." He goes, "Dan, it doesn't make sense to me why you're here. Like, I've seen a bunch of kids come and I see you stay out of, everybody else getting in trouble and doing stuff and being sneaky and you're trying to do your homework. Like, you just don't belong." And for whatever reason, man, like, that was the first time I think I've ever heard anybody share their belief in me and who I truly was. I mean, my whole life I was told I was like troublemaker, trouble kid, Danny, they'd call me, like I'm Dan, not Dan. Danny's like the bad kid, right? And like, so bad growing up, I had to like sneak in the woods to hang out with my friends. And here was this guy that's telling me for the first time in my life that he believed in me and that I didn't belong there. And it cracked me wide open. Like, some part of me thought, well, if Brian believes it, maybe there's some truth. And that was the beginning of kind of the seed that got planted to eventually get out of prison. I got released to a rehab center and 11 months of therapy, like worked on myself, rebuilt the trust I'd lost with my parents, my self-confidence, my self-worth. I mean, I felt like I didn't even deserve to breathe the air. Like, other people probably should take these opportunities. And so like it took a while. And it was at the end of that program where I was helping the maintenance guy, Rick, clean out one of the cabins. And in one of the rooms was this old 486 computer and a yellow book on Java programming. And I'd never touched a computer my whole life. And I just read the book and booted up the computer and got the computer to say, hello world.
Hello world.
Dude, yeah. So anybody that writes code knows like that's the first exercise in any programming book. And I became an addict. Like I took my addiction to drugs and being bad kid to going all in on software and just falling in love and allowing myself to be engulfed in this. And my dad actually made an agreement with me. He's like, you know, if you finish the book, you have an unlimited budget for computer books. And true to his word, we got an old computer and I would just go to the local bookstore and like work my way through the computer books. Like from back in the day, it would be like Perl programming and, you know, PHP to Linux and all these different, you know, frameworks of the internet, database design. And that became the foundation of building, you know, my software empire it's so nuts right now. Like I go visit, like I was just there 3 weeks ago. Like I go back every year. The thing I'm most proud of is like, I want to help those kids. Like I go back and share my story to hopefully inspire them, to let them know, like, because the biggest fear I had when I was there is that I'm going to get out and have a boring life. And anybody who follows me on Instagram probably can see that's furthest from the truth as possible.
Yeah, from what I'm getting in short glimpses, I agree that's probably impossible. And you remind me a lot of myself in certain ways. And one of the things I'm sensing, and it came up for you, and I'll get to this part, is an addictive nature, an all-in nature, and a go hard at whatever it is you do. And where that worked against you, a few weeks before your wedding, your fiance says, I can't do this because you're never there. The same way I take, you call it the GSD mentality, and apply that to everything in your life. Buy back your time and putting all the systems, the processes, the ways to work to get out of that GSD mentality. What are we talking about when we say GST mentality? And how is that ruining your life until you could get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, anybody that's an entrepreneur, Clint, probably can relate to the addictive nature of just getting shit done. Like literally going all in. And I had dinner with my mentor last Friday. You know, this guy's, you know, on his way to being one of Canada's billionaires. He's got an incredible business he's built. And we were talking about just like the addiction of the deal, the addiction of the momentum, the addiction of more, right? Like it's kind of awesome. Like it's this feeling of, you know, like progress and momentum and just, you know, accomplishments. And it's not like at a certain point, it gets away from like the base Maslow's hierarchy of like just, you know, basic needs to like you're producing more. Then it's not about the money anymore. It's really just about the opportunity to create. And I went all in. And what happened was I had built 2 companies prior, started at like 17 when I got out of rehab, and again at 19. And I failed hard, like so bad. My dad begged me to get a normal job. And I was like, I just can't. And he's like, you know, I thought I was doing great. The fact that I was sober and alive and, you know, doing something productive with my time, he still was like, you know, maybe you should just get a job. This entrepreneurship stuff isn't working out for you. But I just kept going. I started consulting to kind of make ends meet, pay the bills. And it wasn't until I was like 23, 24. So I failed my second company, shut it down when I was 21, and took a few years off to try to just recalibrate. So like people see me today and they're like, how did you do that? I'm like, a lot of failure, like a lot, like just there's nothing I've ever shared strategically with somebody that I can't point to. This is the moment I learned that. And to your point, you know, I start this third company, Spheric Technologies. I hired an E-Myth coach. I read the book, The E-Myth, by Michael Gerber, Sarah's Pies. I listened to it. I didn't even read it. I listened to it in the car on an 8-hour drive. And I hired this coach and he teaches me the fundamentals of business in a way that like finally made sense. And within the first year, I went from failing 2 companies to almost making $1 million in my first 12 months of business. And because of that, I was worried that if I slow down, I'm going to lose it. I mean, like anybody that's ever been in momentum, they worry like, I don't know why this is working, but if I stop, there's a like because I can't figure out what it is. I'm worried it's the thing that makes the whole thing implode on itself. And there were several times building this company over a 4-year period where it almost did implode on itself, but I kept pushing forward. Now, the thing that I didn't calibrate for, just going all in, that 100%, consumption of my life was my business. My identity was my business. Everything, business came first, right? And it got to a point where I was a horrible friend. I remember going to my best friend Nick's house for his birthday party, and I brought my laptop. And this was like normal. And I'm sitting there in his living room, like dealing with contracts and replying to emails and hiring and looking at resumes. And I'm like, I'm the best friend ever. Like, I'm so busy, but here I am at his birthday. Like, I really value our relationship. And if you ask him, he'd be like, Dan was the most ridiculous friend to be with. Like, he brought his laptop to my birthday party. Well, there's a full on party going on. Or like, I wouldn't call my brother or talk to my dad for months. Like, I was just traveling and trying to keep all this plate spinning. And throughout that period, I got in a relationship and we ended up getting engaged, and I thought my whole life was on track. And a few weeks before the wedding, I come home from working on a Sunday afternoon. I'm late. I'm supposed to be home for some dinner party we're going to. And I walk into the house and I see my fiance in tears. And she can't even speak. I mean, she's just beside herself. And she just took her ring off and drops it on the counter and just says, I'm done. And walks past me and goes to her parents' house. And that was the last time we were together. And what was crazy is just like my whole world from the business to that relationship just shattered. I mean, even the fact that 6 months later, we get acquired and I become a multimillionaire. And it was the most depressing moment in my life because that was like the last part of who I was now gone. So I had like our future I was doing all this stuff for, that's no longer. The business is gone on to the new owner. And here I am with money and nobody to share with. It was almost like, I don't know. It was this like cruel universe game it was playing with. I couldn't understand at the time. I had to go see a therapist and try to work through it. And that really became, I think, my rock bottom for learning a different approach. Because I had two options. I either resolve the fact that I will always be the cool uncle, single, no kids, right? The perpetual, bachelor, or figure it out. But I didn't want to be in a relationship with somebody again and go through that. Like, it was so painful. I didn't think it was fair to the other person. And I didn't personally want to go through it, that like there was a point where it could have went either way. And luckily, I decided to move to Silicon Valley and San Francisco, and I've discovered just through watching how these people build these companies that there's actually a way that you can do it through the buyback principle that I teach now. But it took work. It took a lot of work. I had to become the person who could attract the type of wife my wife is today. Now we have two beautiful boys. They're Irish twins. I mean, that's how much love there was in the moment. 11 months apart. They're literally the same age today, just because once a year for that month, they're the same age. And yeah, I wouldn't change a thing. Horrible while it was happening, but it also became such a beautiful lesson of a forcing function, really, to become better at the driven part I've always had. You talked about the addiction, the obsession. Yeah. That I've got. I got to watch out because it's easy for me to get engulfed in it. So that's why, like, if anything, learning how to buy back my time to get leverage, that's my throttle. To the degree that I learn how to get leverage, and I teach a lot about this, I have unlimited ability to create and turn it off because the creations keep happening when I'm not there, which is the most beautiful thing in the world. Like, when you go on vacation and come back and your businesses are bigger, that's like, all right.
It has to be the goal.
Oh, it should be the goal. I mean, the goal really is about creating assets that have equity that are more valuable year over year. Most people don't even understand that. Most people play the active income game, right? They don't even realize that it's the personal net worth game. It's the equity value game.
So you're talking here the three levels.
Yeah.
We have the employee, the entrepreneur, and the empire builder.
Totally.
Do you want to give a high level of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think it's important.
Get people to empire builder by the time we're done.
Yeah, and I think most people are scared by the word empire. So I'll just state right off the bat that empire in my world is a life of unlimited creation you never have to retire from. So I wish every creative, I don't care if it's a podcaster, social media person, a coach, I would love for you to get to a place where you can have unlimited creation in your work that you never have to retire from because it doesn't feel like work. So that's the goal of this. But yeah, most people start at level one as I call them time traders, right? Level one is you trade your time for money, right? And that's usually the employee side. It's where we all start. Doesn't matter who you are, unless you're super smart and figure it out before me. But like, yeah, you just trade your time for money. As you get into the entrepreneurial level, level two, that's where you can start looking for leverage, right? And you can trade a resource, which is capital, and you can buy, you can buy resources, you can buy know-how, you can buy labor, you can buy whatever, right? And that's where a lot of entrepreneurs get to, hopefully a couple 100,000 in revenue. Maybe they have 1 or 2 part-time people. But if you keep going, you get to 2 million in revenue, right? That's when you have a team of about 12, 14 people, but that's where things get a little crazy, hit the pain line. But if you keep going, you get to a place where the money works for you, right? And I think that's the part that nobody explained to me for a long time, right? That once I heard, I couldn't unhear it, right? And one of my mentors, Naval, talks about this. He's the one that really taught me about leverage and just what is value. So I started angel investing when I was 26, 27. I started putting my excess capital into deals, into companies, buying equity. And that was because I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and they talks about the quadrant. And it's like, oh, I want to be an investor. But I didn't understand that even being an investor or a business owner is the goal for every person. So like even in my primary businesses, it's not about active income. So most people think it's about cash flow. It's about profit. It's like, how much money did I make this year? Which is true. But even more important than that is how quick can you run to get your business to a place where somebody else would find value in buying it? Because the big opportunity for wealth creation is not in the business's ability to produce cash flow, although that is valuable. Truly, it's somebody else buying the company and writing a check for multiple 7 figures, if not 8 figures, right? It's not the $500,000 a year it pays you per year. Although again, you can compound that if you put it in other vehicles like real estate. But I would argue real estate is a form of what I'm talking about, which
100% it is.
Exactly.
100%
So like,
it is. Yeah.
let's just get really clear what game we're playing, which is equity value.
That's right.
And having the asset, the machine continue to grow, even if you're not. Now I don't believe in passive income. I think that's kind of a bit of a farce, or like, it's just like chocolate bar. Like I get it. It's good marketing. There's just variations of passive. Cause like, even if I own a portfolio of real estate, I have to pay somebody to manage it.
That's right.
I got to manage them. It's not like unless you're just putting money in an S&P 500, but I'm talking about like focusing on the equity increase and having those engines of business continue to grow. That is the game we're playing. So to the degree that you get good at that skill, that's the opportunity to grow.
And so you already mentioned the buyback principle, and the idea being that we want to focus all of our time on what we excel at, what we truly enjoy, and where we can add the most value. Can you talk to people about where you learned that one and how focusing on that is what started to help you to grow your business?
Yeah, I would say, so in the book, the buyback principle states we don't hire people to grow our business. We hire people to buy back our time. Because if you do the second, you get the first. But if you do the first, you don't always get the second. Like a lot of people hire employees to only not have any time to manage employees, let alone manage their own projects. So the idea is it's a calendar over capacity thing. So I think first-time entrepreneurs are like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to hire somebody to help me edit my podcast or write code or design logos, right? It's like, or sell real estate. It's like, no, hire somebody to take care of like lower value stuff so that you go do the thing. So it's things that light you up and make you the most money, right? Because that's the trade. It's like you're looking for leverage. I take a $10 bill and I give it to somebody and I go and produce $100 worth of value in that hour I paid somebody else to buy back an hour of my time. So in the process I teach is time and energy. I don't know where I learned the energy part, because that one for me, I think just naturally, I looked at my calendar and I was looking at the activities that lit me up and that made me money. And it was just natural for me to say, like, I don't like this. But at first it was the easy stuff. It was the, cleaning my house, meal prep, administrative tasks, travel, research, calendar, emails, all that stuff. Like that's pretty basic. But I mean, when you start looking at it from an energy point of view, you start realizing it's like, well, finances, right? For a lot of entrepreneurs, like, I don't like the details. It's like, cool. Well, if you get to scale, you can hire people to do that stuff. Well, what about running meetings? See, most entrepreneurs think that every meeting they go to, They're supposed to run it. There's 0 meetings in my life I go to that I run. 0.
Wait, so walk me through. You show up at a meeting.
I'm not the run. I don't
Who's
own
running
it.
the meeting?
Somebody else. I don't care. If it's a new meeting, I go, who wants to run the meeting? It's like, okay, Sam runs a meeting or Bob runs a meeting. It's like, cool. You own the meeting. You own the agenda. You own structure. You own the thing. Da, da, da. And to the degree it's fun for me, I will keep showing up. And everybody else on the call, this is one of our core rules in our company. If at any point somebody's attending a meeting that they feel there's no value to them or anybody else that they're contributing, they do not have to show up, and they're voting with their presence if it's a valuable meeting. And if any boss forces somebody to go to a meeting, they're allowed to come directly to me to have a conversation with that person, because to me, meetings are the biggest time waster period in any company. It's almost like the bigger it gets, the more meetings there are to try to deal with the inefficiency of a bad leader's ability to communicate. If a leader communicates clearly strategy, vision, priorities, then people, and create a framework for winning, people should be able to fit within that without having 7 meetings a day. I mean, it's crazy. Some people, it's like, so for me, I just know that I don't like to run meetings. I like to be a participant. I want to create. I want to edit. I don't want to author. Like energetically, I don't know what it is. Just for me, I don't like to run a meeting. So if you tell me, this is the meeting, here's why we're having it, here's the agenda, and I come and I can collaborate within that agenda and I feel it's a good use of my time, I'll keep coming. As soon as that meeting starts to look yellow, and over time, over a 2-year period, it can start off as bright green. And as the thing goes on, it can turn into yellow and get a light pink and eventually a dark red. I usually get rid of my meetings when they start looking yellow. And whoever owns a meeting, I just tell them, hey, there's parts of this I don't think I need to be here for. This is the part that I feel I can collaborate in. And I just don't think I'm going to come to this meeting anymore. How about I do this instead and still get you what you need? And they're like, all right, cool. But I negotiate that. I just think most CEOs stay in meetings of lack of fear of it not being productive if they're not there way too long, when they should just never be responsible for running the meeting, so that they can free up their calendar so they can go do meaningful work that actually drives the business forward.
And when you're talking about that there, going from green to yellow to red, part of what you're talking about is this idea of auditing our calendar or auditing our activities with the green, yellow, red being the energy that it gives
Totally.
you. The other half of that you talk about is putting dollar signs beside the activities, which seems to be the core of where we're supposed to focus our time, is what's green and what has high dollar symbols. So what does that look like for you? Or someone you're coaching, our listeners are hearing us and they're saying, okay, well, what do I do?
How does this work? Yeah.
How do I do this with my calendar? What do you say to them at the beginning?
Yeah. So I unpack the whole process in the book. But when I work privately with clients, and usually these are clients that are, multi-8-figure CEOs, the first thing we do is a time and energy audit, right? And we essentially have them over a 2-week period log every 15 minutes. What did they do with their time? And for the really advanced ones, we're going weekends and personal. Like, I don't care.
Full time.
The whole window. I want to see a 14-day slice of their life. And I want to analyze it, because to me, business and personal, it's all the same thing. At the end of the day, we need the energy levels to show up for our kids. And we also need the energy for certain decision making. And we need to make sure we're being productive and producing outcomes that are typically strategic in nature, not tactical and activity based. And to the degree that we can stack together things that light us up, it brings energy into the next thing, right? And that's what the whole point of like creating a life you never have to retire from. If you never have to retire from your week because your week encapsulates the family, the health, the work, the team, the hobbies, whatever it is, then that's just a rhythm you should be able to run for the rest of your life, because it's super fun and efficient. So that's what we do. We log everything they do every 15 minutes. We highlight in red things that they hate doing, highlight in green things that they like doing, use a dollar sign to state anything that would be a low cost to pay somebody else to take over. So email, they spend 2 hours a day on email. That's $1 sign. It's very low cost. But if it's like strategic planning for the year, that's probably $4 signs, right? So it's like 1 to 4, just like how expensive is a restaurant. And then the cool part is once we do this audit, we literally grab everything that's in $1 to $2 signs and red out of their calendar and look at all those activities. And that's the job hire for the next hire they hire. That's the spec.
And so one of the main problems, you highlight 4 or 5 challenges people have with taking things off their plate. the person that's listening to this right now, they're saying, I'm a creator, I'm getting into my coaching business. I hear what they're saying, but I can't afford to do those $1 items. What would your argument to them be to help them see, wait, you can't afford not to do this?
It's very simple. At the end of the day, anytime you do a task that you could have paid somebody else to do, okay? And some people are like, well, like you just said, I can't afford it. Unless you don't have revenue, your hour is worth something. And you can hire people in third world parts of the world where you can pay them, $3 an hour, $4 an hour, $5 an hour, right? You can get an intern for free as part of like an agreement with the college. Like in your local town, you can ask for help. There's a bunch of ways you can get support. But not doing that means that you're literally swimming upstream, right? And then they say to me, well, nobody else can do it as good as I am. I don't disagree, but 80% done by somebody else is 100% freaking awesome. That's my belief, and like, well, I can't afford it. It's like, yeah, you can afford it. You just haven't been creative enough. Like ask yourself, how do I be more resourceful to have support in my life, right? And even if it's not the best talent, it's some talent. But all I know is that I can, if I needed to, like if I lost everything tomorrow, first thing I'm doing is getting an executive assistant to take care of the back office stuff. And all I'm going to do is spend my time in the front office, talking to customers, delivering for customers, finding opportunities, enrolling those people into my world. Like it's all forward facing to have the back office taken care of. And that person can sit right next to me. So I'd borrow the money from my brother. I'd be like, bro, I need some money. I need to hire an assistant. Because there is no better trade of time, especially when you're starting, than having somebody to take over your email, your calendar, research, bookings, scheduling, so that you can go full on into money and green energy productive stuff.
And the line you used there, I used it on my buddy yesterday after I read the book. Part of it was he's up in a Soyuz with me visiting for vacation and talking about the challenge of we're in similar roles. His company's bigger, but he has probably 6 less people in key senior positions on his team because he's just done all of that in his career. And that's part of why he is where he is. I would argue maybe part of why I'm there is because I've hired those people to make up for what I may be missing that he has. But you talked about the line being 80% done by someone else is 100% freaking awesome. So that overcomes people who aren't willing to let go because they think nobody can do it better than I can. How many of these entrepreneurs who are coming to you are stuck with that one? And does that lead to, you talked about it earlier, you alluded to it, the pain line. Can you take people through what the pain line is and why that's what we're trying to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is every entrepreneur that still runs their company has a level of belief that's still locked in that. So that like right off the gate, if you can't admit that somebody else could run your company better than you, then you also believe this. There's just degrees of how much do you believe this. Like some people are stuck at like, I'm an individual, nobody else can do better. Nobody can do anything better than me, or nobody else can do it. Or they just have so many fears around like, what if they mess up? They make me look bad. It's all the fears, right? The fear of judgment, the fear of loss, whatever. And then over time, through like being forced to do it, right? Your customers explode. Like you have so many customers, you can't deal with it. You like beg for talent and bring people in. And you just kind of like muscle through it. But the truth is until you get to a place where you can hire a CEO to actually run your company, which I do every day, you can literally hire these people. You can buy a company, hire a CEO, they run the company. And then now it's run by somebody else, even 80% by somebody else. They just bought you back 60 hours a week. They are running an asset that prior to you finding that person to run, you had to run. So while you're off on vacation in wherever cool part of the world you want to be in, somebody else is running the thing. The same is true for an individual department. Like every time, I'm so grateful for my team. Like I say, every time I see them, thank you, appreciate you. So amazing. Because I know that if they didn't do that thing, somebody else, and maybe, hopefully not, would be me, right? It doesn't matter if it's my house manager, my executive assistant. It's like, I'm so grateful for you guys showing up every day. Do they make mistakes? 100%. But do I make mistakes? Every day. So like literally, I think we don't even hold ourselves to the same standards we hold our team to. Like entrepreneurs are crazy. Like we make mistakes all the time that we have to like walk out of, and decisions, and we didn't read the fine print and all this stuff. Yet when our team does it, it's the end of the world. It's like, no, it isn't. It's just a learning opportunity. Slow it down, let them take it over, work through them. That's why like a third of my book is leadership principles, because I think most entrepreneurs just don't even know how to lead properly, that they're always going to be the bottleneck. It's called a bottleneck because it's at the top. And that's the truth. Is like every business will grow to the level of the leader. It's called the law of the lid. John Maxwell talked about it in his books. And we need to develop our own skills so we can grow the organization.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy what you're hearing so far and want me to be able to get your favorite guests on this show, please do me a quick favor. Subscribe to the show and leave me a rating. The 30 seconds of your time will mean a ton to me. And if you don't learn this step, which is I'm going to let that person do the 80% that I think they'll do of what I could do, you can't get from level 2 entrepreneur to level 3 empire builder, can you?
No, if you don't learn to let go, and that's what I mean. It's like a lot of folks, especially like coaches, agency owners, because they have this like specialized skill. They say I have a specialized skill. And that's why all the examples in the book, many of them are artists, right? I talk about, Tom Clancy, the author, right? I talk about Andy Warhol, the artist. I talk about Oprah, the public figure. Like I talk about all these people because I wanted to address the creators, right? The artists that say, nobody can do it as good as me. But here's the thing is what entrepreneurs are supposed to be is we're supposed to be the machine builders. We're supposed to create the machines that build the machine, right? So if I'm an artist and I have a certain painting style, my job is to reverse engineer how do I do that art and be involved in the process so the magic is present. But if I can take my ability to produce art from 1 piece a month to 10 pieces a month, I've dramatically changed my business opportunity. I changed my economics. I changed my future. And that's where I think a lot of people that do the work, the podcasters, like, I mean, as I was promoting the book, it almost felt like every podcaster that read it was like, oh my God, thank you. I needed 100%. This book. But every time I tell them, it's like, all I want for you is to do this.
That's right.
And as soon as you're done doing this, go do another one. Like that's it. You should just be talking to people. That is your unique skill. That is the thing that seems to light you up, that you enjoy doing, that actually makes you the most money because it produces a piece of content that is monetizable. Every aspect of the editing and the writing of the copy and all this stuff, like allow other people to support you, and you can still be there as an editor. You're just not the author.
Yes.
Right? I still get final creative review, but in batches. So I can like review things in a batch and give my thoughts, and then it gets fixed and then we're good. And over time, the team will learn that way, but I'm never the bottleneck. The machine never has to stop for approval. I'm there if I'm available to provide feedback, but I'm also okay if something goes live that isn't perfect, knowing that that's an opportunity for us to learn as an organization. And instead, I'm moving faster because I'm never creating a stopping point. And I think that's where a lot of people get hung up.
And so now, because this ties to one of the rules that you talk about in the book, I took copious notes to your point about being a creator. I was like, hey, this is going to be the framework as I start to turn this into a business, being also multiple other businesses that will flow from it. And one of the things that really jumped out, which I think you were just hitting on there, is the 10-80-10 rule. So the idea being, well, why don't I let you explain the 10-80-10? And now, possibly when you were writing, we didn't even have ChatGPT yet. So the ability to use the 10-80-10 rule with AI seems to be creating an avenue for us to have endless
it's
content
even more.
engine.
I mean, the 10-80-10 rule, I just observed like all these different, folks, including Gary Vaynerchuk. Like Gary has a whole group of people called Team Gary that is the 80%. So he's 10%. He comes out, I don't know how he does it, but I've seen videos of him do it where like there's 30 people outside his office and they're all working. We've got copywriters, editors, blah, blah, blah. And he'll come out and he'll just share his thoughts. Like, hey guys, I think we should double down on LinkedIn, this kind of post. I think we should start doing this on Twitter. I noticed the read more gets better engagement instead of the threads. Let's do that. And then that's the 10%. Then he goes back and back to back. Like they're like anybody that thinks that Gary doesn't work his butt off, that you guys are crazy. Like nobody works is just bananas, 10-minute intervals. And then the team's doing the 80%, right? They're recording the content, they're editing the content. And then Caleb, his old video guy, told me this, like literally they have an internal iMessage chat that all the editors publish finished pieces into to try to get Gary's attention. And if he sees something he likes, he'll take it, he'll add the copy, and he'll publish. And that publishing is a signal back to the team, you got one, right?
Wow.
I like that.
Okay.
So it's that, but that's the 10% feedback loop, right? So just like Steve Jobs was involved with Johnny Ives in the studio, right? The design studio, he'd go in and they'd argue about product and material and design and philosophy and roadmap and all that stuff. And then Steve would leave and he'd go into meetings with Tim Cook and other people, talk about other stuff. And Johnny would keep 80% prototyping and designing and building and talking to manufacturers and finding weird materials and hard drives and all these things. And then Steve at the very end would come in and be like, we need to tweak this, this, and this. And his last 10% was on stage and how he presented it to the world.
Okay.
And that rhythm never changed. It was ideation at the beginning, the first 10%, the production side of things, the execution, the 80%, and the last 10% is integration. It's integration into the organization. How do I want to position it? What's the magic, right? It's even how Steve would like present. Did you ever notice on every Apple product, like especially iPads, when you plug it into power, the time changes to 9:41? You ever notice that?
No.
Dude, it annoys the crap out of me. I think it's not even when you plug it in. It's when you share your screen from your iPad to your laptop, the time changes because that's the time, for the most part, they would do a big product release. And Steve Jobs always wanted the time to be the same, consistent in all the screenshots. So like that's at the level of detail that integration step can be, is where your fingerprint is so ingrained into it that you have like these weird little quirks, but this part of the system, it's the machine that builds the machine. It always ran that way, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like Steve decided to run WDC whenever he wanted to or do a big release. It was like based on the cadence of the calendar and what they needed to release for Christmas and like what got upgraded in this meeting and this meeting. Like there's a rhythm to the magic. And I think if you just step back as a creator, you can actually identify it, and then you can take pieces of that magic and give it to other people to support you to increase the throughput.
And so if I'm on social media, let's use Twitter as an example, as my bread and butter, or LinkedIn, I'm coming up with the ideas. I'm even outsourcing ideation.
Yes.
And then I'm saying, which ideas do I like?
We collaborate on ideation. So I have a writer for Twitter.
Yeah.
And he goes through all of my video content. He goes through my Instagram stories. He goes through things I did 7 years ago. And he goes, boom, that's a piece, that's a piece, that's a piece. We sit down. He goes, hey, here's the content schedule. I think this is an awesome concept. Can I work on this? Can I work on this? Can I work on this? It's like, yep, add this. No, yes. Do this, reference this, mention this person. Like you give them the part that makes it you, your voice. You teach them how to write. Like I have a whole document called the Dan Lexicon. It's like my guide to writing as me. It's all in there. It's probably 30 pages long. It's ridiculous. Like it's got pieces of stuff that I wrote in the past. It's got words I never say, words I always say, language structure, everything. Like if you follow it, nobody could, like my designer, Rich, is kind of like, he's my creative director. He's the decider of like, did Dan do this or somebody else do this? If he can figure it out, then it's not good enough, right? Like he should not be able to tell like that was Dan, that's not Dan. Because this document exists. But then I have a writer that we ideate on the ideas, but they even came up with the ideation because I want to be an editor and an author.
Okay.
Right. And then from that, then they go develop the content, bring it back to me. We look at it and I go, yep. Tweak this. Yep. So literally what could have took me 20 hours takes me 2. Okay. Just like my YouTube video. Like my team went and did all the research to find out all the pieces of videos we should produce. Right? They did the research on our competing video sites, like people that are like us that write good content, what went viral for them, what are pieces we've done in the past on different outlets, like this tweet went viral, this piece on LinkedIn went viral. We needed a full YouTube video on it. They bring that back to me. We look at it. I go, yep. We create the top 10. Then I sit down and do a high level outline. They fill it in for all the creative and the jump cuts and the B-roll and all that stuff. Then we go shoot. Then they edit. Then they publish. It's a 10-80-10. Except even on super creative projects, people don't understand, like, this is how Hollywood works. This is how books are written. right? Like when I like the book, I'd say it at the end, kind of like Kaiser Sose and Usual Suspect, the very end, it's he walks away and all those little, just disappears and all that stuff. But at the very end, I wanted people to know, like, I used the buyback principle to write the book. Now, are every one of those words my words? Yes. So the outline was co-created. So there was an outline based on what I've talked about. So I've already been teaching this for 15 years. The outline was done by my writing partner. I reviewed it. I said, great, this book outline makes sense based on what I've already taught in the past. So it's all my outlines and frameworks. That went to my video team. They went through all of my videos that I've ever produced, clipped out every word because we have internal search. You can search everyone. Clipped out everywhere as I've said, 1080-10, da-da-da-da-da. So all the stories, all the examples, all the stuff, transcribed it, goes back to my writer, Paul. And chapter by chapter, we built this agile iterative process to work on the book so that it bought back all my time. And then it got edited. I mean, we did a 5-day edit where I was involved with my copywriter just to make it even more sound like me, right? But man, I bought back hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours, writing this book over a 2.5-year period. We hired a researcher, we hired other people to help with the editing stuff. Like we had a designer. Like some people don't realize, like you should be an editor, not an author. Like, and I would argue it actually produces better work.
Okay.
Because we inherently will lean away from things that look like work. And they could care less. They want to do the best thing in the world. So even though we would normally say no, because that looks like a lot of work, they go, no, this would be awesome. And you're like, yeah, I know why you think it's awesome, because it's like your customer saying, you know what you guys should do? You should do this. Yeah, but they don't understand all the work that needs to be done to do that. So they will always say that because they want the best product. Your collaborators, your co-creators, they will always fight for the best idea. Like my video stuff, like anyways, I could spend like days just talking about that. They have 100% pushed me to produce a better output because it was more work, but it was the right work that needed to be done.
And how much of the collaboration and the people on your team are, let's say, onshore versus offshore? And how do you look at dividing roles between onshore team members and offshore team members, if there are any?
Yeah. The one thing that's unique about my approach is I don't have, like, when people say like virtual people, like how you get paid structurally, like country, payroll, contractor, full-time, benefits or whatever, like that's independent from how do I see you as a contributor to my team. Mm-hmm. So even part-time contractors are invited to our all hands, to our weekly meetings for the departments. They do get one-on-ones. Like they are treated like a team member, right? And where they live, we've always built remote teams my whole career. Like this whole like work from home thing, I was like, been doing it for 20 years. So like, because it's software, we work with open source projects. Like literally I've coded with people I've never met. I don't even know who they are, right? It's just like anonymous names in some code repository. So yeah, to me, it's less about where they're physically located and more how you interact with them and how you treat them. I always call it hearts over hands. Like what I want is somebody to think about my problems when they're not working. Right? I don't want to just have some person that's a number in a queue that does work and gets it done and I don't even know who they are. I care more about like, hey, I want to know what their desires are, who they are, just the way I like to work, and then invest in them as a person to be better and create that feedback loop.
So the one thing we didn't talk about, we've somewhat alluded to it as we've gone through the conversation, but we didn't hit probably one of the major things we want people to envision in their mind, which would be the drip matrix. And I'm a sucker for anything with quadrants. Do you want to take them through what the matrix looks like? And we're really trying, like every matrix ever, we're trying to get in the top right corner, get rid of the bottom left corner. Yeah. And a lot of what we talked about, we delegate that crap away pretty easy. Yeah. And then we'll talk about the top left, which becomes a little harder to delegate our way out of.
It's funny because when we were working on the book, my editor got feedback from another copywriter that it's like, it's a matrix. It's not a quadrant. And I'm like, it's a quadrant. They're like, no, it's a matrix. And I'm like, maybe you guys are smarter than me, so we're going to go with matrix, but I'm glad that you called it a quadrant because I'm on board with that. Yeah, the idea is really like, makes us money, lights us up, right? So it's like on the left side, it's like makes us money. The right side lights us up, like things we want to do. So in the bottom left quadrant, it's the D in the drip matrix is delegate, right? It's doing things like as fast as possible. And it doesn't matter if it's interns, friends and family, like just have people come in to support you to buy back that time. But honestly, it's even the 5-time assassins. Like, stop doing the things that inherently suck your time that you self-inflict on yourself, right? So that's the bottom left quadrant. The right one is invest. Because like a lot of people that buy back their time, they actually don't fill it with anything productive. Like that's the biggest thing I see. I had a buddy of mine, I taught him how to do this, and he bought back like 35 hours of his week. And we get on a call for like 15 minutes. He wanted my advice. He goes, man, my life's changed. This is amazing. This is the only call I've got all week. And I was like, oh, you misunderstood me then. Because like it wasn't to buy back your time to do nothing. It was to buy back your time to build your empire. Like you have a ton of other stuff you should be investing in. Skills that you got to develop to become better. Character traits you got to develop, being courageous, confident, consistent, all these things that most people are not to go to the next level. Or even just the beliefs, their worldviews. How do you see the world, right? Or invest in relationships. Like once you buy back your time, you should be strategic about replacing it with things that are going to push the business and really yourself forward. That's the bottom right side of the quadrant. The top left is about replacing yourself in these key roles, right? And I teach this whole framework called the replacement ladder, which arguably I think is one of the most interesting parts of the book, which answers the question, if I had to start from scratch, what sequence would I hire people for different departments in my business based on this philosophy, right? Like what's the least amount of dollars spent to buy back the most amount of time? And you start at the bottom and there's 5 different levels. That's a replacement ladder. Once you essentially, get rid of all the things that suck your energy that don't make you any money, and then you start replacing that with investing to become better, and then you work your way through the replacement ladder, then in the top right quadrant, this is where you wake up and you work. Like I'm not a fan of the 4-hour work week where you don't do anything, right? I'm about building empires. I want people to express their creative output as bright and as powerful as possible. Like I always say, like every human is here on earth to become the best version of themselves, right?
Yes,
The 10.0 version of themselves. And then share that person with the world. And that could be your world, could be your family, your community, your teammates, but ideally the rest of the world. Like the best thing we could ever do for, society is to heal ourselves, right? Become the person we needed most in our darkest times, and then help other people do the same thing, right? I just look at entrepreneurship as almost like the ultimate tool to do that. It's like the coolest personal development program that never stops. It has an unlimited compensation program. Like, that's cool, right? But the whole point is to invest in becoming better, to then spend your time on things that create more value for your company that you enjoy doing. So a lot of people, if they're more extroverted, they'll obviously say, well, I just want to be on stage. I just want to talk about the vision. I just want to, do this stuff. Cool. If you're more introverted, maybe you just want to sit there and you want to write code. I actually don't care what it is. Like I have some clients that I want to be the CTO and I'm going to hire somebody to do the other stuff. Because in their world, that lights them up, that brings them the most juice. Totally cool. It's just knowing that and then becoming the person who can build the company in a way so that eventually you do that. And when you're there, that's this cool life where you don't have to retire from it. Like most people got to go on vacation because they've set their life up wrong.
Yeah, they go to recharge and reboot.
What are you recharging from? Yeah.
From not being happy with what they're doing.
Yeah. Like I go on vacation and I sit there going like, do I really need to be here for 3 weeks? Like, I'm kind of bored. I wish is there any other entrepreneurs around I could hang out with? Like,
so you're creating that in your community by bringing everyone here, which we talked
it's
about
the integrated
earlier.
Life. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you talked about the 5 rungs of the ladder. We've got admin, delivery, marketing, sales operations, leadership functions.
Yeah.
And then you talk about this concept that at each level, we want to make sure there are 3 key components that we have to hit in order to be successful at outsourcing that work. Do you want to take people through a little? We don't have to go through each rung of the ladder, but what are those 3 things they're looking for to replace?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. One is the feeling, right? If you feel stuck in your business, you probably don't have an administrative assistant, right? And when I say that, I don't mean a virtual person that you send emails to. I'm talking about like a partner, okay? Yes. Like my executive assistant is my partner. I have a daily meeting every day, okay? And I talk about it in the book. I even give the agenda. It was a balancing act to write a best-selling book that's full of stories and hope and motivation and inspiration, but is incredibly tactical, right? Like nobody's going to read the book and go like, I wish he actually told us how to do it. It's like, I give you the folder structure for my emails.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. But like the part that I really wanted to explain to people is like, on a daily basis, this person is responsible for me. And I ask her to treat me like that. You own my calendar and you own my inbox. And those are the two primary outcomes. Yeah. So there's really two primary outcomes per role. And most people get that wrong. I remember my brother had an assistant and, I think it was like 3 or 4 months after the fact, I was at a barbecue at his house and I was all excited. I was like, Pierre, how's it going? I was expecting to hear the same thing I hear from everybody, which is like game changer. Why did I wait so long? Oh my gosh. And he goes, I don't understand what the big idea is. Like, it's useful. She's useful. It's helping me a bit, but like, yeah. And I go, oh, you didn't delegate your inbox. You just CC her on emails to do stuff. I go, there's a difference. See, your inbox is a public to-do list of strangers off the internet asking for your time. Think about that.
Yeah.
Like, I have an office here. I wouldn't allow randos off the street to come up the elevator to walk into my office and be like, do you want to invest in my crypto scheme? Do you want to come speak at my 2-person meetup? You know what I mean? Like our inbox is full of people we don't even know asking of things of us, right? Sure, there's signal in there, but there's a lot of noise.
There's a lot of noise, yeah.
So if that was how the world worked and it used to work like this, how would you set it up? Well, the way the world worked before is you have an assistant sit outside your door. And when you came up to the door, they would say, hey, how can I help? It's like, well, I want to talk to Dan. What do you want to talk to him about? Well, I need to talk about my crypto project. It's like, tell me more. And you tell that person what your project is. And they go, cool, well, let me write it down. I'll review it with Dan when we meet up and I'll circle back only if there's an interest. If you don't hear from us, there's no interest. Like that changes the dynamic because now I don't do inbox. Like when I say I don't do it, like I don't do email.
You don't touch. You don't touch an email that hasn't already been touched.
I definitely don't touch an email that hasn't been touched. I almost don't even do email anymore, and I use it to send messages if the person I'm interacting with is a meeting I've requested, and that's their preferred mechanism. For the most part, it's personal relationships I'm cycling, and it's all done through SMS. But even through SMS, sometimes we teach people how to treat us. So I'll have a friend and be like, hey, saw you're coming to Scottsdale. Love to have you on my podcast. I screenshot the text and I CC my assistant and that person. And I tell my assistant, hey, can you move this forward? And I step back.
Nice.
Yeah. And I think like those are the kind of things that people don't realize. That's way more efficient and faster than me to get tied up and spending 2 or 3 hours a day trying to coordinate stuff.
And was that the ski trip with Richard Branson and the conversation with his EA, where she said basically,
we have breakfast every morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got the privilege of spending a week with Richard Branson, and like everybody else was there. I remember the first day they were all like, yeah, I'm going to ask him about my startup and I'm going to ask him about this investment, this real estate thing or this. And they were like, what are you here to learn? I go, I'm just here to understand, how does a guy manage 400 companies? Like the Virgin Group of companies, 400 businesses. And he owns them all, but he doesn't run them. And he lives a pretty cool life because we're all here at his house, lodge, 21 staff, 16 bedrooms. Like this thing is massive. And this is what he does, because that sounds like a cool life I would like to live. And the first thing I noticed is that he travels with Helen, his assistant, and she literally takes all inbound requests on his time. 98% of it she's able to route and redirect. And then the few things she doesn't know how to handle, she sits down with him every morning for breakfast and brings it to his attention. He shares with her the thoughts behind why he responds the way he does. She cues that up for the future. And every meeting just gets more efficient to the point where she deals with more stuff. And she's the glue between him and all 400 CEOs and all inbound requests on his speaking and all this stuff. And while she's dealing with that for the rest of the day, he's on the chairlift with us and we're going backcountry. Dude, we went set up a big inflatable jump park and we're hucking it off this jump into this friggin', soft landing in the middle of the Alps. I mean, it's, once I saw that, I go, man, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it at that level. I had an assistant, but I didn't understand. I need somebody to help me deal with the inbound. And that person, like my executive assistant, converses with my lawyers, my accountants, all my team members, my CEOs, my friends, my parents, everybody to move all the pieces while I'm here with you.
Love it.
It probably pulls forward in a year. If I think about like the economic value of production for me in a year, if you just think about like, what if I had another meeting right after this as an investment and it was like a 45-minute pitch meeting that I wanted to take, it gets canceled while I'm sitting here and she fills it up with 2 one-on-ones that had to get done next week. She pulls those forward. So like if we just look at economic value of pulling these ideas of this productivity forward in a year, it's probably 3 to 5 months of value. So when people are like, how much do you pay your executive assistant? I'm like, that's not the right question. It's how many months of extra production in a year could you produce by having that person part of your life? What's that worth? What's your month worth? Because I think it's easily 3 months. That's not an exaggeration. If you just think about like how much time we spend on a daily basis, and it's cycle times. We're not efficient at getting back to people to pull things forward, right? Or we sit in how many times we open up an email, read it, and goes, I'm not ready to deal with that. Unread.
Yeah.
Right?
Mark it unread.
My assistant has zero emotion on anything I do. Okay. If you,
yes, I get. Yeah,
like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, just even on
she
that,
doesn't care. There's no
zero.
emotion.
She's
no
like, this person wants you to wire $375,000, and I'm like, I need a decision. I'm like, just send it. Fuck. Oh, okay, we're doing this. All right. You know what I mean? Like, it's cycle time. It's open email, process, move it forward. And she has permission to hold me accountable. Like, if I'm dragging my feet on a project, she will literally put in my calendar. She'll come to the meeting and she'll sit there on Zoom to watch me get it done. Because it needs to get done right now. And I'm like, I'm kidding. I'll do it today.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last question I'll throw at you on the book, and then 4 rapid fire questions if we have time for that, is you don't like hacks, but you do provide 4 really good hacks. Let's give the listeners one, make them come get the other 3 when they read the book.
Yeah.
The 1-3-1 rule.
So the 1-3-1 is probably one of the most powerful ones. I'm going to let them read the book for that one. Okay. I would rather give them the $50 to fix it, because that one really helps unlock, pushing things down to people, right? So the idea is that I have at different levels of my organization a budget that they don't need permission to spend to fix any problem they see.
Perfect.
Okay. Frontline workers, it's $50. Managers, it's $500, and it goes up. Like my executives, my C-level executives, it's $50,000, right? They can spend $50,000 to fix a problem without approval. And the rule is just afterwards, you just got to tell me you did it. And afterwards, if you tell me you did it, I'm like, wow, wouldn't have done it that way. That's a feedback loop, right? Like one of my favorites, actually, and Sam's here. He's going to know the one I'm going to tell. But I love it because it actually shows you in your organization where there's maybe underperformers or bottlenecks, right? So the $50 to fix it, Sam, my video guy's working on some thumbnails, and the turnaround time was too long from our designer. So he goes and hires a designer and pays somebody else to do some more new thumbnails. And then, I don't know, somehow they showed up in Slack or whatever. And my designer is like, who designed these? And Sam's like, well, I just hired a designer to do that. It's like, what are you talking about? I'm the designer. But the whole point is the leader now has to go, oh, well, he wouldn't have done that if there was no issue in the velocity or the expectation management. So to me, I loved that happened because it demonstrated an opportunity for the organization to get better and empowered the people to solve problems. See, most companies would grow faster if they actually allowed the frontline workers who see everything going on, they have perfect context to actually solve the problem the best way they see fit. And after the fact, tell their leader, hey, I did this, this, and this, and they can then give them some guidance and correction. That's why it's $50 or $100 or $500. But to say it's nothing and every decision has to go through the leader, that's silly.
It's crazy.
It's dumb. So we've set it in stone. We honor it. We coach on it on our all hands. We teach people how to do it. We praise people that do it right. And like it happens all the time where like one of our leaders had to make a decision. It was a $5,000 decision. He just made it, hired a contractor, solved the problem. I was like, hey, when did we start working with them? It's like, oh, they made the decision. It was $4,800. They had the budget. Hey, that's awesome. I wasn't involved. Whole business moved forward faster. So that's one of them. But as you mentioned, the 1-3-1 is actually.
Yeah, it's magic. I loved it. So we went pretty wide. We went deep on a number of areas. Is there anything we didn't hit that you want to make sure the readers get?
Yeah, I mean, It's kind of funny, right? I think in business or marketing, I call it chocolate broccoli. Like we always use the chocolate. We give away the chocolate because it's what they want, but the broccoli is what they need. And that's why the book, I started off and came out of the gates with like some really tactical, make you money, free up your time strategies and playbooks that people haven't seen before at the level I share it. But the broccoli literally starts showing up in the transformational leadership chapter.
Yes.
And that to me, if there was like a desire on my part, like I just want to teach entrepreneurs how to be better leaders, like, and truly get into a place where they seek feedback, right? There's a whole chapter called the F word, because I think that every person's opportunity sits on the other side of a meaningful conversation, getting feedback on their performance. Like if they can really get comfortable and actively seek it, don't wait till there's a fire. Okay? We want to be firefighters, right? We want to fire prevention, meaning that you sit down and you seek that feedback on how they're showing up as a leader. I'm showing up as a leader so I can be proactive about it. That would be the like ultimate thing. Sure, a lot of people buy back 35 plus hours of their week following the processes, but I secretly want them to do that so they have the space to then go double click on who do I need to become, right? Because the world doesn't get easier. Like this entrepreneur, somebody asked me today is like, how did you overcome your biggest challenges? I go, dude, they're happening on a yearly basis. Like my goal is to create bigger problems. If my problems on a year-to-year basis aren't getting bigger, it means I'm not swinging bigger. And the world will always come, like we should hope if you have $1,000 problems, you should hope to have $10,000 problems or $100,000 problems, because it means you're operating at a different level. So create the space by buying back your time to then go invest in yourself to become more so you have more to give. That's the broccoli. That's what my desire is. I want to teach people how to build businesses that they don't grow to hate.
Love it. And one rapid fire question for you to feed people some broccoli. What's one habit, mindset shift, or behavior change you've had in your life that had the greatest impact for you?
I mean, there's been so many. If I had to think through it, I mean, the assistant one is the most important. And I'll tell you why it was hard for me is I had a belief as a Canadian, okay, that it would be rude to have somebody reply on your behalf, right? Like if you emailed me, of course I'm going to reply. And if somebody else replied, what a douche, like the douche factor level 11, right?
Yeah.
That was a blocker. That was a belief I had that was blocking me from unlocking real massive opportunity in my life. And it took for me going physically and looking at a billionaire in his home, watching him operate for me to get past that. I would love every entrepreneur to have the opportunity to do that, because sometimes we need that. We need that experiential thing. But like that was it for me, is just realizing no matter what it is, here's a guy that has 400 companies. He works through his executive assistant on all matters. Like, could I have her manage my passport? What if she was responsible for my credit cards? What if she was responsible for my vehicles? What if she was responsible for all my real estate? What if she was responsible for interacting with my lawyer, my finance teams? How would my life be different if I could wake up and just say, here's, things are on my mind. Could you move these forward? And I'm going to go and do the stuff that's going to make me better. And then we come back at the end of the day. And so, I think a lot of people don't know how that could work. So if people want, I'll do something special, Clint, is if you follow me on Instagram, okay, a little give and take, and message me the word EA, like message just whatever, EA, executive assistant, I'll send them, no opt-in, no nothing, my Google Doc of my executive playbook, like my EA playbook that I use with my EA, sanitized. Like I had her clean it up the other day for a friend. And I would send that to your listeners. It's just like, I want you to see the breadth of things.
Of what she touches.
Yeah, and even the principles, like how I structure it. Like I have these 4 core principles, these North Star principles that I think once you saw, you'd be like, oh, I should have that for every leader in my department. It's like, yeah, you should. Like there's a way that I set up my companies that I think once you see this document that's not in the book, that would really unlock kind of the belief around what's possible, like Richard did for me by spending a week with him in his home.
I'm sending the DM for that one. And where can people find you? Where do you want them to go?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is my favorite. I think their messaging platform is the best. Twitter, I'm on Twitter, investing a lot of time on Twitter, LinkedIn. And then YouTube is really where we're going to be creating a bunch of shows and a bunch of content. But you know what? I mean, at the end of the day, whatever works for the other person. And I really want to reinforce, Clint, the idea of like the desire of every person to want to become the best version of themselves. I think like business is cool, but if we actually take a step back, like what are we doing here as a human? I think we're here to heal ourselves, to go through the process of dealing with whatever trauma. I know I grew up in a lot of trauma and overcame that, like heal ourselves and then try to help other people get through that process faster, like heal others. And I think that's just a cool place. If you realize that, then the whole world gets easier. It's like every day I wake up to try to be better, to deal with my own crap. So then I can maybe potentially teach other people just through my example, honestly, how they can overcome that from, whatever it is they went through. I think if it's kind of why we're parents. Most people have kids for that desire. I want to create a life that's different for my kids than the one I experienced. I just think with social media, we can do that at scale.
Listeners, buy the book. You will not regret this. Super tactical. Loved every minute of it. And that's a wrap. Thanks, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
If you like the podcast, you'll love our new newsletter, The Growth Guide. Every Thursday, straight to your inbox, with the goal to help you be better, achieve more, and become financially free. Check it out at our website, thegrowth.guide. Subscribe and learn more.